Hello again, and welcome to the LSU Sports Insider Podcast. Today is Monday, February the 24th. I'm Zach Ewing, along with LSU women's basketball beat writer for The Advocate, Reed Darcey, and our columnist, Scott Rabalais. We're here to talk a little women's hoop today. It's almost March, guys. I can't believe it, actually, but Saturday is March. So we are coming down to the end here, and we do have a lot of women's basketball to talk. We're going to talk about their big win over Kentucky yesterday and really kind of dig into it was Kim Mulkey's 750th career win. Amazing accomplishment. We'll talk about where that puts her historically, but also how she and this team in particular just kind of have a knack for finding ways to win.
Yeah, we've talked about it ad nauseum throughout the season. I think they lost that close game to Texas. That was one where their offense kind of fizzled out down the stretch, but that was really an anomaly. Every other time they've been in a close game, they pulled out a win. And yesterday against Kentucky, they had to overcome a 16-point deficit at first. They trailed by 12 at halftime. That was the largest halftime deficit they faced this season, and they still pulled out a win. It was really impressive to see how things flipped from the first half to the second half. They came out at halftime, and they really looked like a completely different team. And they, once again, they were really good down the stretch, and once again, Mikaylah Williams kind of lifted them across the finish line. So it was a really impressive win, really important win, too.
Kim Mulkey said earlier this year, she said, they don't have the team that can blow a lot of people out. They can score a lot of points, but they'll give up a lot of points like they did to Oklahoma, or they'll get in a lower scoring, more defensive tussle like they did yesterday against Kentucky. But then she said after the game yesterday, maybe that's to their benefit as they get closer to March, as you get to the postseason, that maybe they have been tested in a lot of ways that will benefit them. And look, they've lost two games on the road to top 5 teams in South Carolina and Kentucky. Games I think they could have won at home had they been played in Baton Rouge instead. So it's a team with some flaws, a team with some a couple of issues, but nonetheless a team that is winning and has shown they know how to win the tough games, and that counts for a lot.
Yeah. Sorry, Reed.
We get on the podcast. I feel like we nitpick them a little bit because at the end of the day they are 27-2, and their 2 losses are on the road against top 5 teams that they were really in those games. So yeah, most of what we say today, any kind of criticism that we'll say is going to feel like nitpicking, I would think, just because they've had such a good season. And a lot of that about how they're not blowing out teams, a lot of that has to do with how good the SEC is, right? They've gotten 4
much better than last year.
Yeah, much better. They've got 4 ranked wins now, 2 over Tennessee, 1 over Oklahoma, 1 over Kentucky in the SEC. Those are big, and that's why they're in the position they are now.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think you're right. We kind of, we're looking to fill time. We need something to talk about. And talking about, well, they won again and they beat this team again. You start to get a little repetitive, and so we do look for maybe a few nits to pick, right? And so we are probably guilty of that, but it is true. They're 27-2, amazing record. We're going to dig more into it. We're going to try a new feature here on the LSU Sports Insider podcast where most of our episodes are going to be focused on one thing, as they usually are. But we do want to try, not to ignore everything else that's going on around the LSU athletic campus. And so to that end, LSU baseball suffered its first loss, but they did take 2 out of 3 from Omaha this weekend. We'll have an LSU baseball podcast later in the week. They have their first real big tests this week in the Dallas area. And then the softball team stayed undefeated, beat Penn State and Nichols, and I'm missing somebody. They beat somebody else at their own tournament. Their first home games of the year, they remain undefeated. And then also big news for gymnastics, Rab.
Yes. Are we saying gymnastics right now?
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, gymnastics also won at Kentucky on Friday. And the big news was they were able to have a score, well, not a great score, 197-2, not a super great score, but they were able to eliminate that low score they had, a 196-6 at Arkansas, boosted their NQS. They're back up to number 2. Of course, we talked a lot about before how their NQS, how did they beat Oklahoma and drop in the national rankings? Well, they're back up to number 2. And some of the biggest news was Haley Bryant did the all-around for the first time all season, but she did not win the all-around. It was won by Kaylin Chio, their remarkable freshman who won her 4th straight all-around title, all against SEC competition, which is really impressive. They're back home-ish this week against George Washington at the River Center, so we'll see. They'll win that meet, too. They'll be just gunning for a big score in that one.
All right, so that's the story with gymnastics. They have senior night coming up, and we'll keep an eye on that as well. But this is going to be a women's basketball podcast, and our main topic is going to be how this team continues to win even when it's not comfortably ahead. And we've all seen basketball games enough to know that in close games, sometimes shots just don't go in, or somebody else gets a lucky bounce, or, the ball goes off your foot, or something crazy happens and you just can't win every close game. I mean, that's true in any sport, but it seems particularly so in basketball. But for whatever reason, this LSU team, as you said, they're not blowing teams out. Even when they're playing the bottom teams in the SEC, they're winning by 10, 15 points. They're not beating anybody by 50 like South Carolina and Texas are. So we want to find out exactly if that's just a clutch trait, or if that's luck, or if it's something in between. We're going to take a quick 30-second break, and we will be back to dig into that right after this.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
Into the LSU women's basketball propensity to win close games. But I do want to start here, guys, and this dovetails in with the larger discussion. But it was Kim Mulkey's 750th career win. So first of all, let's give her flowers on that amazing accomplishment. She is 6th among active Division I coaches in women's basketball. She's not going to catch Gino Auriemma or anything, but I do think she has a chance. I mean, you guys know better than I do how long Kim plans on doing this, but she has a pretty good chance of becoming one of the 6 or 7 women's basketball coaches of all time to win 1,000.
Yeah, I'd have to look at the numbers, but you'd assume as long as she keeps coaching, she'll get there. I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rab. 25 wins in each of her 4 seasons at LSU. And
26 actually.
Yeah, and 20 wins in every single season she's been a head coach. That's 25 years now. So, she wins and she wins and she wins, and that's really all she does. And yesterday, I think that she pushed all the right buttons, in my opinion, to get LSU back from that deficit and really pull off a win. I thought the ball pressure that she put on in the second half to get Georgia Amore uncomfortable. Cheyenne Day-Wilson did a great job on her. That really threw Kentucky off rhythm, which allowed them to force misses, LSU to force misses, and then that really helped their transition offense get going, which is what they really want to do. And then she did a great job as well of putting the ball in the hands of Mikaylah Williams, who we can talk about in a little bit. She did a great job of running the offense through some difficult stretches and creating some open shots, not only for her but for her teammates as well, and that's a huge difference from last year's team to this year's team.
Sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, but it's a good time with her reaching that milestone to step back and just appreciate again how great Kim Mulkey is. If someone asked her in the post-game press conference we were watching on Zoom yesterday about Kenny Brooks coming to Kentucky and winning this first year, and he's done a very good job. He talked about Kentucky being a sleeping giant. Well, she awakened a sleeping giant at LSU. I mean, remember, LSU, they went to 5 straight Final Fours with Simone Augustus and Sylvia Fowles, but they never got over that hump and won the national championship or even got to the national championship game. She does it in year 2. And like you said, consistently winning at a high level, got the number 1 recruiting class in the country coming in. She's 750 and 120. That's an 86% winning percentage. Some people debate. They look at the works of William Shakespeare and say, how could one person have written all that? Well, you could say that about Kim Mulkey's career. She won 4 state titles in 4 years at Hammond High School. They won like 107. She won a national AIAW national title at La Tech. They won the first NCAA title at La Tech. She won an Olympic gold medal. I think she won a Pan American Games gold medal. She won as assistant coach. She won 3 national titles at Baylor, comes to LSU, and wins another one. I mean, it's just unbelievable to think that one person did that. And we'll never have a Mount Rushmore in the state because we don't have a mountain. But if you had a Mount Rushmore of Louisiana sports, you think who would be on it? Well, Drew Brees would be on it, and Pete Maravich, and Billy Cannon. If you picked 4 people, she'd have to be on it just to represent, for her career, but to represent all the great women's athletes that have come from this state, which is a substantial number. She'd have to be on it. I mean, she's one of the most remarkably successful sports figures as a player and a coach that this state has ever produced. And let's throw in the fact that she's the only coach whose national titles count, men's or women's basketballs, who won national titles at 2 different schools. Rick Pitino was there, had that distinction. but he had a title vacated at Louisville, so it doesn't count, technically. But what a remarkable career! And people ask, I think she's getting mellow. I think she's slowing down. I don't see it. I don't see her getting mellow yet at all. She's still fighting and scrapping, for every single thing, and she's been a driving force behind LSU's success.
No, and I think, first of all, this is the only podcast where someone will compare Kim Mulkey to William Shakespeare.
Yes. Absolutely.
So if that's not worth your like, I don't know what is. So hit the like button right now. Subscribe while you're down there to the YouTube channel.
And by the way, we need to do a Mount Rushmore podcast at some point.
Swamp Rushmore. I've already got the name for it.
Very good.
Yeah,
I like that.
figure that out.
We'll put it on the tree stubs coming out of the
We'll do that in the summer.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
Okay. You raise a good point, because I think that Kim Mulkey sometimes gets talked about more for her snark, her on-court demeanor, which we saw yesterday. I mean, that was the thing making the Twitter rounds, was this like just death glare she had, and ESPN hit it right as they went to commercial. It was great.
Perfect camera work.
Yeah, her outfits. I mean, all of this stuff. Right. She gets talked about more for that, and maybe the reason that stuff is out there is because she wins. There's definitely. I mean, if she was unsuccessful, nobody would care about that stuff, or they would think it was distracting or silly or whatever. But I do think in some ways it distracts from the fact, Reed, she is a historic winner. Those 750 wins, by the way, don't even count what she did at La Tech, because that wasn't NCAA. Am I right in saying that?
Well, these are all her coaching wins. She was an assistant coach for a long time at La Tech, so she wasn't ever the head coach there. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, she won a bunch at Louisiana Tech. In fact, they were 430 wins in her time there. I mean, again, Leon Barmore was the head coach, but she's obviously very close to that. I mean, she has done nothing but win.
Yeah, and she's really stayed true to herself throughout that entire time. Whether you like that or not, whether some people like that or not. So, and right now, big picture wise, she's got LSU in a pretty good position right now. They're one of a few teams that are really gunning for a Final Four appearance. You'd think that next year they'll bring back Flau'jae Johnson and Mikaylah Williams. At least you'd expect Flau'jae.
And bring in the number one recruiting class.
And bring in the number one recruiting class. Add that to those two who can be your pillars, and then maybe LSU will have the depth it really needs to compete with South Carolina and finally beat them. So yeah, she's one of a kind. Everything she does is geared toward winning, and she will win. You can bank on them winning 20, 25 games every single season and being in the mix for the Final Four every single season. That's kind of the kind of consistency that she has earned throughout her entire career.
Young Reed and I have talked about it. She can be difficult to cover. She's very demanding, and not only with the players, with the media, everything. And we've talked about dealing with her once or twice. And I told him not too long ago, I said, dealing with her sometimes reminds me of what it was like dealing with Nick Saban, and what it was like dealing with Skip Bertman when he was the coach. Because if you didn't ask the right question, if you didn't phrase something in a way that they thought was correct, they're going to call you on it. And so I think you can see a pattern there. I mean, those are two of the greatest coaches in their sports ever, and dealing with her is similar in that regard. And that's fine. I mean, she doesn't have to be a lovey-dovey personality, and she's not the person that I think a lot of people think of her. But what is? I asked Bob Starkey, who coached under Sue Gunter here at LSU, coached under Dale Brown. Sue Gunter is a Hall of Fame coach herself. What makes her so successful is the attention to detail. Nothing escapes her detail. It's all the little things that add up to that she puts an importance on everything, and that's where it goes. And look, Kenny Brooks is an excellent coach in Kentucky. He has never beaten her.
He's 0-5 against Kim Mulkey in his career.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Yeah. She is a living legend. She's already in the Hall of Fame, and I mean, I don't know. Is she easy to deal with? No. Is she the nicest person? Not always. At least not to the media. Is she perfect? Absolutely not. But does she win? Unquestionably, yes. Yeah. Unquestionably, yes. And she has continued to win. And so that's it leads us into I don't know, maybe Kim Mulkey is the main topic of this podcast, but I do think for this season's LSU team, Reed, as you said, we've mentioned it over and over again, they have this propensity to win close games. So the question is, are they just clutch? Are they lucky? Is it somewhere in between? I mean, I was looking at Bart Torvik's analytics website, and I know there's her hoop stats also. The analytics sites don't love LSU. I think they're 8th in her hoop stats. They're 11th in the country in Bart Torvik. They don't blow teams out, and analytics like that. They like to see that you can command a game, that you can control a game against a lesser opponent, and sometimes even against a good opponent. And LSU doesn't do that. But I did notice Torvik has this filter for close games, and he uses 6 points. So this is not perfect. It says LSU's 5-0 in games decided by 6 points or less or overtime. Okay, but that excludes like yesterday's game. Yesterday's game was a close game. It was a 1-point game with a minute to go. LSU won by 7, so it doesn't count. The Oklahoma game, I believe they won by 7 as well. Now on the flip side, the Texas game, they ended up losing by 7. We know that was like a 3-point game with a minute to go. That's a close game also. So it's not perfect, but the point is they've been extremely good at winning these close games. Now, I thought, okay, does Kim Mulkey just know how to coach? Maybe that's part of it. You go back to 2024, they were not as good in close games. They were only 2 and 3 in these, again, not a perfect measure, talking about 6 points or less or overtime. But if you go back to the national championship season of 2023, LSU was, bringing it up, I believe, 4-1 in close games. And then Kim Mulkey's first year at LSU in 2022, they were also very good in close games at 7-2. So this is not a one-year wonder. This is not just, the bounces are going their way. There's something there, I think.
I totally agree, Zach, and I think the analytics are one of the reasons why they are kind of below where they are in other places, because the analytics tend to think that you will regress to the mean at some point if you're playing all these close games. And LSU hasn't really regressed to the mean. I mean, they lost to Texas, right? That was a close game that they lost. South Carolina was a close game that they lost. That was within a few possessions late in the game. But other than that, you look at games against Stanford, Washington, Oklahoma, Kentucky, both of them against Tennessee, all close games that came down to the wire, and LSU pulled out wins in all of them. And I think this season the difference from Kim Mulkey's previous years is that Mikaylah Williams right now is the trump card, right? In the win over Stanford, the win over Oklahoma, and now the win over Kentucky, she has really guided LSU's offense down the stretch of all those games, and LSU has come out with wins because of the clutch shots she made. And I think yesterday we saw her as a facilitator, as a playmaker, and as a scorer. She did a wonderful job of creating good looks, converting those good looks, and getting her teammates involved down the stretch. I think we've seen more and more as the season gone on of LSU using her as that lead initiator up the floor. Typically, she's starting possessions off the ball, and then a point guard brings up the ball, and then it gets to her some kind of way. But now I think more and more as the season has gone on, LSU has used her to bring the ball up the floor and initiate the offense and really have everything run through her. And that's a big difference from last year's team, because last year as a freshman, she wasn't exactly ready to do that. But now she's developed and refined her game to the point where she can do that. And I think that's one of the huge reasons why LSU has that record, like you mentioned, Zach, in close games.
It's hard to remember that she's only a sophomore. I keep wanting to think that she's a freshman like Flaugier, but then I think, well, no, Flaugier is a freshman, junior, and she was only a freshman on last year's team, wasn't on the national championship team. I'm gonna bring up a name here that who does she remind me of? And I was thinking of it. She kind of reminds me of Magic Johnson. In that he could play multiple positions. He could bring the ball up court. He famously played center in the 1980 NBA final when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was injured. He could shoot outside and go drive inside. She can do all those things, and she's just, like you said, a wonderful facilitator of their offense. And I was a proponent earlier this year. I was arguing with Reed. You got to tell me that Flaugier Johnson's not a first-team All-American. There's 5 players in America who are better than her. And maybe there are 1 or 2 on this team. They have a tremendous nucleus. Like they're all key players. Any coach, any team in the country would like to have that core of Flaugier and Mikaylah and Anissa. I mean, that's tremendous. And again, they were all in double figures yesterday. Anissa had another double-double. By the way, her 99th career double-double. But as you said, I think we've seen Mikaylah Williams kind of grow and mature, and be even, and she's had confidence, but even grow more into that leadership role that is hard to do as a freshman, especially on a team last year with Angel Reese and Morrow and Haley Van Lith and stuff like that. But now it's a chance to be more for her team. It's going to be interesting to see.
In SEC play, she's averaging 5 points more a game this season than she did last year. She's shooting from the field at a much higher percentage. She's shooting from 3 at a much higher percentage, and she's maintained her rebounding and assist averages. So she's taken a little bit of a leap here from her freshman to her sophomore year, and she's giving LSU that added element it didn't have on last year's team, or I guess a perimeter player who can create her own shot and initiate the offense. She's fully capable of that now, and she's one of the best in the country at it. She's so efficient, Zach. Like she is just a pure bucket getter, as pure as it can be. Her shot is so smooth. Her mannerisms are just so efficient and smooth, and she is just so composed in those big moments. So it's really her game, I think, is really mature, and it's really beyond her years, and it's been impressive to see.
Yes, is it luck? Is it good? It can be a little of both. I mean, there was a play yesterday. They were up by 1. Flaugier had the ball, and she got like 3 players like converged on her in the paint. She fired a pass out to the top of the key, and Mikaylah hits this 3-pointer to go up 4, I believe. I'm saying that correctly.
That shot put them up 4. Yeah.
And you can miss the 3-pointer, obviously. Most of them don't go in. But she's a clutch player and a clutch shot, and it wasn't shocking at all that she hit that wide open 3.
But I will point out, to create that open look, they had to play smart offense. Like Flaugier, to get the ball, she had to time a cut along the baseline to get open, so that Mikaylah could give her that pass, and then the defense collapses on Flaugier, and she can kick it out to Mikaylah for the open shot. If Flaugier doesn't cut, then Mikaylah might throw a pass to Cheyenne Day Wilson, who they left open on the wing, and that's what Kentucky wanted. They wanted her in a position to shoot that kind of shot. So if Flaugier doesn't make that smart cut, make herself available, maybe Mikaylah doesn't get that open 3. So that play, I think, was more smart basketball than luck.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that part of what makes this more sustainable than most teams that win all these close games, and I'm not saying there's, like you said, Rab, there's always some luck. I mean, all sports have some element of luck, but I think it is that nucleus. They know how to play together. They play together all the time. Late in the game, they're the ones who are going to be on the court. Now, you're walking a tightrope, as you are with all of this, because if one of them fouls out or is hurt or something like that, then you may be in trouble late in the game in an NCAA tournament situation. But I'll also say, and you brought this up at the top of the show, Scott, like, they've been in this situation before. If they're down 5 with 5 minutes to go in a Sweet 16 game or something, that heart rate doesn't rise quite as high as it might for a team like, I don't know, Texas or UCLA or somebody who hasn't been in that situation very many times. And, they would look up at the scoreboard in that situation at the under 5 timeout and say, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? This is totally foreign to us.
It's great, like you said, for analytics and, as you mentioned, and things like it, to blow teams out all the time. But we saw it 2 years ago in the Final Four when South Carolina was undefeated and it just had handled everybody all season long. They had the close game in the SEC tournament where Cardozo banked in the 3-pointer to beat Tennessee in the semi.
That was last season.
Yeah,
the year before.
Oh, okay, that was last year.
Yeah.
So they did have a couple of close games, but not that many. They're undefeated, and then they get in the semifinal against Iowa in Dallas, and I don't say they panicked, but some nerves set in. And, LSU being behind, they were well behind in their semifinal with Virginia Tech, coached by Kenny Brooks, with Georgia
They're
Amore.
down 12, and they erased that lead, came back.
Yeah, and there's a lot they can draw into those situations. So I think it's something worth saying that the scrappiness of this team, that their resourcefulness, their fire, and not to panic is a big thing. And again, you don't have to just go to one player. If Flaugier's not able to get to the basket, maybe Michaela's hitting the outside shots. If her outside shot's not falling, maybe Anissa's getting the putback baskets and certainly the rebounds. So they've got a lot of things going for them. Now, what they don't have going for them is a great point guard situation, as Reed wrote about this week.
That is a professional.
Great job, Brad. That is a wonderful segue.
Professional.
He's because I was really good at the podcast.
Yeah. I was going to say, this is all well and great, and maybe this makes it even more impressive, Reed, that they're doing this without like someone seizing the point guard job, because Cheyenne Day-Wilson, as you mentioned, played very well yesterday, especially defensively, but she also only had, I think, 1 turnover. She had 3 or 4 assists. She had a couple of steals. She scored 8 points, which was just 1 shy of her season high. She played very well, but she's not even starting every game at the point. Sometimes it's last year Poa. Sometimes they split time. Like one or the other seems to be Kim Mulkey's preference for a given game. But what you'd really like to see going into the postseason, I think, is one of them kind of seize the job.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you want to see Cheyenne Day-Wilson be a little more consistent in that role. Maybe if she can hit some more open shots, and that would be huge for LSU. I think what you'll see going forward is that Kim Mulkey will probably let the matchup dictate which one of those point guards gets more minutes. I think she trusted Cheyenne Day-Wilson more yesterday to match up with Georgia Amore and to guard her, just because she's such a good defender. She can move her feet well. Not that Poa isn't a good defender, but Shy does a great job of moving her feet, being really like a pest, and staying in front of a perimeter player, an opposing point guard. So I think that's why they went with her yesterday, and she was great. But it's important to point out that the point guard position is really, really important for LSU, and it's also really, really difficult for a player to come in and play in their first season with the program. Kim Mulkey puts a lot of responsibility on her point guard, and she really expects a lot from her point guard because she played that role as well as you could play that role in the early 80s at Louisiana Tech. Right. And that system is very similar to the one she's running today. So she knows what she wants, she knows what she expects, and she holds her point guards to a high standard. Haley Van Lith struggled with it all last season. She never really quite figured it out. It wasn't the right fit for her. And so they need to find, hopefully, for them down the stretch, that they can find one of these players, either Poa or Cheyenne Day-Wilson, to fit that mold of what they need out of that position and what they want out of that position. And if they do, then that's a huge boost for their national title chances. If not, then it's something that could hold them back from making the Final Four.
What they wouldn't give probably to have Alexis Morris on this team.
Yeah,
that was the best point guard situation.
She ran it perfectly. The way she defended, the way she found her open looks in the mid-range, the way she kept the ball moving, that's the perfect archetype of what you're looking for. And they've still been looking for that ever since she graduated.
Right. That's right. She could score, she could run all over the court and defend. And it's hard. It's hard to find that person. And of course, she was a second-year point guard too in the Kim Mulkey system. To your point,
she was
in
at
2023
at Baylor too.
Right.
So
right. So there was a lot of experience there. So that's something that they might have to work on for next season. But they have what they have this year. And I think Reed hits on a good point. It's kind of a matchup. I asked Coach Mulkey last week after their last home win against Georgia. Was it the Georgia game? Yeah. And I said, tell me about your point guard situation. How you decide? And she starts doing this like she's flipping coins. She's like this guy. And it's almost March. This is who you are. This is what you have. And you don't have much way to work around it, unless you want to have Mikaylah Williams play point guard all the time. But then does that detract from her offense? So
maybe. And if you do that, then you leave either Cheyenne or Poa. You either leave them as a shooter on the wing, and the other team's not going to guard them.
And they're not good shooters. That is.
Yeah. So it's not really an option. So that's what they got to do, and you hate to like I said, nitpick a team that's 27-2 and still has a shot to win a piece of the SEC championship. They're one of those even where they are. Someone put a graphic I thought was perfect. And Kim mentioned it yesterday. There's about 7 teams that can win the national championship this year. It's wide open. South Carolina, Texas, LSU out of the SEC, UConn, USC, UCLA, and Notre Dame, who we saw lost yesterday, but they're still an excellent team. Any of those teams could win. LSU is definitely in that mix. To me, I see right now. To me, right now, they look like an Elite 8 team again. They're going to need to get something better out of that point guard position to get to the Final Four and then to win another national championship.
Yep. Yeah, I think it'll be fascinating once they get to that tough game. And this is going to be matchup dependent. It's going to depend on who they're facing in that Sweet 16 or Elite 8 game where the rubber's going to meet the road. Do you go with Day-Wilson? Do you go with Poa? Or, like you guys said, do you go with Mikaylah Williams and then put Kaylin Gilbert in as a shooter or something like that? I mean, she has a few options, Kim Mulkey does, but not a ton unless one of these point guard seizes the job.
She could also go big and have Jersey, Wolfenbarger, and Samaya Smith in the paint and then have the 3 stars around them. They haven't done that too much this season, but that's another option she could use if she really, really doesn't trust either of her point guards down the stretch.
Which would be rolling the dice with the season on the line to do that. But you never know. It's Kim Mulkey. She'll find a way to win. I mean, that's what she does. Okay, so the next step for LSU as they wrap up the regular season, they have a road game at number 18 Alabama on Thursday. They return home for Senior Day next Sunday, March the 2nd, to face Ole Miss, who's not ranked but is right on the cusp of being a very good team. In fact, they may even be ranked when the new poll comes out in an hour or so here. LSU needs 1 win to clinch the number 3 seed in the SEC tournament, which, between 3 and 4, you're going to have to beat South Carolina and Texas both unless there's an upset somewhere else. You also need, I would say, probably 2 wins to clinch your number 2 seed in the Big Dance. Is that fair, Reed?
Yeah, I think if they drop either one of these games, they might slip down to the 3 line. But right now, I think they're pretty comfortably sitting at a 2, unless, of course, they win out and then win the SEC tournament, then they're
could still get a 1
seed. So
ESPN gave them a decent chance to be a 1 seed at like 21%. They showed some graphic yesterday of the top 3 SEC teams. So they still have a chance, but they need to win some. They're probably not going to get the SEC championship regular season, but they win the tournament with that kind of record. That would be hard to top. And like I said, look, you're going to get one of those teams on a neutral court, well, semi-neutral court. It's Greenville, South Carolina, which is the SEC. Back in the day when Tennessee was running the SEC, they always put the SEC tournament in Tennessee or a state touching Tennessee, and now they do it with South Carolina.
To be fair, every state touches Tennessee, but go ahead.
That's true. That is true. It covers a lot of ground, but it's like they could move the SEC tournament around a little bit to me, but that's an argument for another day.
And that arena isn't great. I'm not a huge fan of that arena. So
I understand why they don't want to have men's and women's both in Nashville, because it's a lot to turn around for in SEC.
But other conferences have done it. The Big 12 has done it.
And then also you have the Predators of the NHL would have to be gone for 2 weeks instead of 1. I mean that.
But didn't you went to Missouri? Didn't the Big 12 have the men's and women's tournaments concurrently? Did they not do it? Have them like the same time? Play one day, one day,
but those are smaller conferences, right? Like with 16 teams and you've got full days worth of 4 games on several different days. Like I don't know how you would do them concurrently, but. You could set up a rotation where men are in Nashville, women are in Atlanta. Men go to Atlanta, women come to New Orleans. I mean, you could find a way, I would think, to set up a rotation, but there's probably some comfort for people in that.
This is my only argument, and it's SEC wide. Is that with the conference as it has expanded, it has expanded to the West with Missouri and Texas A&M, and now with Texas and Oklahoma, and all these championships are kind of centered in the East. Atlanta's always, and the SEC likes its anchors. Atlanta for football, Hoover for baseball, the men's tournament in Nashville, and the women's tournament now in Greenville. And I don't think it's fair to the teams in the West that much, but. I don't think anyone's they like the fact that someone wants it to have their home, and so that's cool. But I don't know. I think it'd be nice if they moved them around a little bit, as you're saying.
Well, we will talk more about the SEC tournament next week. We'll let Reed give his specifics, complaints about, what is it, like Bon Secours Wellness Arena?
Bon Secours Wellness Arena. I'll save it for next week.
The only arena I've been to where there was ever a rain delay.
Yes.
All right, so the SEC tournament is next week, and we'll be back with the show. We'll know LSU's final regular season record and talk more about this team's chances in the postseason next week. Until then, he's Scott Rabalais, Reed Darcey, Alex Lee was our producer, and I'm Zach Ewing. Thank you so much for watching the LSU Sports Insider. See you next time.